the comment section of a lot of my S25 Ultra videos, it seems a lot of people believe that Samsung haven't really changed much on the S25 Ultra compared to last year's S24 Ultra. On the surface of things, the design has changed quite a bit, but the biggest changes and upgrades are beneath the surface, not visible to the human eye. And in this video, you're going to get a good look at some of these aspects thanks to my friend Bill, the thermal imager. So this will kind of give you predator vision so you can see how the heat is handled within the device. So stick around, I think you're going to want to see this. Here I have the Galaxy S25 Ultra with the exclusive overclocked version of the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. This one is specifically for Galaxy phones, and all versions of the S25 Ultra have 12 gigs of RAM. I've also got the Galaxy S24 Ultra here with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy chip, and again 12 gigs of RAM. And just for good measure, I've thrown in the OnePlus 13, which has the standard version of the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, and this is the chip that's available to all manufacturers. And the OnePlus does have 16 gigs of RAM. All three of the phones have the same UFS 4.0 storage, and there are no cases on the phones during this test. And the reason this is important is because if you have a case over the back of the device, it can actually prevent the heat from escaping, and that could lead to early throttling of the performance. The screen resolutions and refresh rates on all three devices will be set to the highest, and all three phones have been charged to 100% and have been resting here on this ice pack so that we can get this test started on an even footing. Now there's a few important side notes that you need to be aware of. All three phones support 120Hz, and the Galaxy S25 Ultra display compared to the S24 Ultra display from last year is identical in resolution, brightness, pixel density, but the Galaxy S25 Ultra's display is said to be a newer version that's around 20 to 30% more power efficient. So let's see if that comes into play. And this is a big one. The cooling chamber size in the S25 Ultra has increased by 40% compared to the S24 Ultra. So now you know, let's see how this plays out. So the benchmark that I'm running here is the 3D Mark Solar Bay stress test. And this is designed to mimic a heavy gaming workload with ray tracing maxed out. And it consists of 1-minute sequences repeated 20 times, and at the end of each loop it will generate a score based on the frame rates, the temperatures and the battery usage. So it should be pretty clear at the end of this test how much of an upgrade the S25 Ultra is compared to the S24 Ultra when it comes to performance, heat management and battery life. And also we'll see if there is a clear advantage that Samsung's exclusive Snapdragon 8 Elite chip has over the regular Snapdragon. Now I know time is of the essence, so let's fast forward to the end of the test and get a look at the thermal imaging. So here are the thermal readings taken immediately after the 20-minute stress test, and let's start with the very visible difference between the S24 Ultra and the S25 Ultra. So the S24 Ultra's heat is largely contained in the top right corner, and the darker colors that you're seeing here are the cooler temperatures. So you might think because the lower half of the phone is cooler, that would be a good thing, right? Wrong. Now if you look at the S25 Ultra, the heat is spread right across a much larger surface area on the back, and this is a good thing because there's a lot more room for the heat to escape, and when it escapes quickly, the chipset becomes cooler and can run faster. So it's pretty clear that 40% increase in vapor cooling chamber size is the real deal. And you'll notice the hottest spot on the S25 is around 1 degree cooler immediately after the test. The OnePlus 13, similar to the S24 Ultra, contains most of the heat in the top right corner, and you can tell by the orange color gradient here, it is moving down the device, but it's definitely not escaping quite as quickly as the S25. And the hottest spot on this device is 51.4 degrees, which is one of the highest temperatures I've ever seen in one of these tests. Usually performance throttling starts at around 45 degrees. Anyway, now let's break down the stats. So I'm going to do this in 4 sections to make it easier to understand. Best battery, most consistent frame rates, most steady temperature, and best peak performance. So the best peak performance is a hands down win for the Galaxy S25 Ultra. It's actually 5.16% better than the OnePlus 13's performance, and that could be due to the overclocked chipset combined with the vapor cooling chamber and various other factors. Most consistent frame rates though goes to the OnePlus 13, with the frames ranging from 24 frames per second at its lowest up to 51 frames per second at its peak. But with that said, it's worth noting that the Galaxy S25 Ultra's peak frames per second towards the beginning of the test was 56 frames per second, so slightly higher there. And the reason the OnePlus might be more stable could be due to the fact that they're allowing their phone to run hotter without throttling, and maybe combined with the fact that Samsung could be playing it a little bit safe with their chipset. After all, they are allowing people to upgrade their phones to the latest software 7 years down the line, so they've got to make sure it lasts. Best heat management is actually quite close between the S24 Ultra and S25, but once again the S25 Ultra does take this one, and it does better off the mark with a slightly more gradual raise in temperature compared to the S24, and that's represented by this red line here. Best battery efficiency is another win for the S25 Ultra, with it only losing 8% during this 20-minute gaming test. The S24 Ultra though was quite close with just 9% battery loss, and the OnePlus 13 lost 12% battery, and this is very closely tied to the heat management side of things. So to just quickly summarize the main differences between the S24 Ultra and S25, the peak performance is around 39.01% better, and I believe that's as advertised. The stability throughout this test is 2.6% better than the S24, and interestingly, the S24's 7th loop score is the same as the 20th loop score on the Galaxy S25 Ultra, and that is a really big deal. So benchmarking is one thing, but is there a notable difference when it comes to actually playing games like Genshin Impact and Call of Duty? So Genshin Impact on Android unfortunately maxes out at 60 frames per second, but you can turn the graphics all the way up, and I'm happy to tell you that the S25 Ultra consistently holds that 60 frames per second with ease, and the same goes for the OnePlus, and the S24 Ultra does perform really well here too. So it's kind of hard to tell you if there's a massive difference, but I will say out of the three phones, I do prefer the S25 Ultra's flat screen. I do think it might be one of the best screens on any phone right now. I did also test out Call of Duty at 120 frames per second, and once again, all three phones can pretty easily hit that 120 Hz and sustain it for quite a long time. But as you saw in the benchmarks, the longer you play, the more the frame rates will drop due to the phone getting hotter, and the more battery you'll lose. So the fact that the Galaxy S25 Ultra is much more efficient means that in the long run, gaming is significantly better on the S25 Ultra. So let me know, guys, were you surprised by the performance difference between the S24 Ultra and the S25 Ultra? And if you're one of the people who thought the Galaxy S25 Ultra hasn't evolved much since last year's model, did this video surprise you at all? And did it make you change your mind? And if you know someone who thinks that there's not a big difference between the S24 Ultra and the S25 Ultra, send them this video. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the differences between the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy and the regular 8 Elite. Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this one, let me know what other phones you'd like to see tested in this way here on the channel. And if you've made it to the end, just know this, I appreciate you guys the most. And if you just subscribed, you are now one of the finest subscribers known to man, and I will see you in the next one. Don't be late.